I couldn't be more proud to serve alongside the most pro-life president in American history.
We could have from 300,000 to 400,000 deaths. That would be just so tragic if that happens.
Hi everyone, welcome to Katie Mack Comments, a channel where I, Katie Mack, comment. But in all seriousness, here on my channel we discuss social justice issues, pop culture, and feminism, all from the lens of my gender studies and psychology degrees. So if any of that interests you, be sure to click the subscribe button down below. Today we're going to be talking about the pro-life movement in relation to Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's nomination for Supreme Court, and Trump's assertion that he's the most pro-life president in history. Opposing abortion doesn't necessarily make you pro-life. If you don't also fight against police brutality, support healthcare for all, wear a mask, and advocate for climate action, then you aren't pro-life. The anti-choice movement has long used the term pro-life to describe themselves, trying to paint people who are pro-choice as anti-life, which is just simply untrue. The anti-choice movement also wants you to believe that being pro-choice means you're pro-abortion, which is also false a large majority of the time. Most people who are pro-choice would prefer to never have an abortion, but believe that pregnant people have the fundamental right to decide whether or not they want to carry a fetus for 9 months in their womb. Many people who are pro-choice say they're morally opposed to getting an abortion and would never do it themselves, but believe that every person should have the bodily autonomy to make their own medical decisions. To say that a person opposing people's right to get a safe and legal abortion means that they're pro-life is far too much of a generalization, especially when there are states that have attempted to make abortion punishable by death. If someone who identifies themselves as pro-life thinks that the death penalty is a suitable punishment for getting an abortion, then they're not pro-life, period. Similarly, although Trump likes to claim that he's the most pro-life president in history, he has actively decided to allow 216,000 Americans to die from COVID, which feels pretty anti-life if you ask me. As the self-proclaimed most pro-life president in history, Trump has decided that the most important criteria for his Supreme Court nominee is their intentions to reverse the landmark decision of Roe v. Wade in 1973 that protects pregnant people's rights to get a safe and legal abortion. This criteria led him to Amy Coney Barrett, who's considered pro-life for her abortion views, but has yet to prove herself as pro-life in any other way. In fact, she has openly criticized the Affordable Care Act, which expanded health insurance coverage to millions of previously uninsured Americans. She believes that convicted felons should be allowed to have guns, and she thinks that immigrants and refugees who need America's help the most should face increased barriers to enter the U.S. In addition, Trump and Amy Coney Barrett held a COVID superspreader event to announce Barrett's nomination for Supreme Court Justice that ended in at least 8 people who attended testing positive for COVID, not including Trump's aides and advisors who also tested positive for the virus. Can someone please explain to me how any of these actions and policies convey that Trump and Barrett are in any way pro-life? If these people cared about human lives as much as they say they do, they would be taking every possible precaution to keep as many people alive and well as possible. They would prioritize safety during the pandemic. They would support affordable healthcare for all. They would publicly denounce police brutality instead of encouraging it. And they would acknowledge and accept the fact that abortions are sometimes medically necessary to save the life of the pregnant person. If anti-choice activists such as Barrett and Trump were truly pro-life, they would look into the medical facts about abortion instead of believing in emotional pseudoscience, such as the false claims that having an abortion leads to negative mental health consequences, heightens risk of breast cancer, and causes pain to the fetus to support their opinions. In reality, according to Planned Parenthood, abortion is one of the safest medical procedures out there. Planned Parenthood also found that about 1 in 4 women in the US will have an abortion by the time they're 45 years old. They also explicitly state that abortion is safe. Unless there's a rare and serious complication that's not treated, there's no risk to your ability to have children in the future or to your overall health. Having an abortion doesn't increase your risk for breast cancer, and it doesn't cause depression or mental health issues. Abortions don't cause infertility either. Planned Parenthood is so often demonized by anti-choice advocates as the enemy, when in reality, Planned Parenthood is the solution to the issue. If you want abortions to be less common, having access to Planned Parenthood is key. According to their website, Planned Parenthood is the nation's leading provider and advocate of high-quality, affordable health care for women, men, and young people. Planned Parenthood is also the nation's largest provider of sex education. If you ask me, that sounds pretty pro-life. Defunding Planned Parenthood is actually pretty anti-life, considering Planned Parenthood health centers offer life-saving cancer screenings, testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, contraceptions, vaccines, pregnancy services, health care for LGBTQ+ people, and sex education for all people, in addition to abortion services. Anti-choice advocates also often fight against comprehensive sex education that goes beyond teaching abstinence, even though, according to research done by the University of Georgia, increasing emphasis on abstinence education is positively correlated with teenage pregnancies and birth rates. Many young adults want abortions because they believe they're too young to have a kid, or they want to wait until later in life to have children. So lowering teen and young adult pregnancies is key to reducing the number of abortions that take place. Comprehensive sex education, as well as access to and information about birth control, are the best ways to reduce abortions. And yet, anti-choice advocates rarely want to increase access to either of these things. It really makes you think, are anti-choicers really that concerned about the fetus? Or are they more concerned with their ability to control women's bodies? Criminalizing abortions doesn't truly reduce them. It just makes them much more dangerous and puts the pregnant person and the fetus in harm's way more than a safe and legal abortion would. It seems like with all this easily accessible information about abortions, people who consider themselves to be pro-life would support keeping abortions safe and legal, because legal abortions save more lives than illegal ones. If a pregnant person doesn't want to carry a fetus to term, they'll find a way to get rid of it regardless of the laws surrounding abortion. But those illegal abortions will put everyone's lives at greater risk than necessary. If you are truly pro-life, then you will understand this and support a pregnant person's right to get a safe and legal abortion that just may be life-saving for them. People who are anti-choice often hold the fetus's life in higher regard than the pregnant person's, which reveals quite the hypocritical way of thinking. As I previously stated, some abortions are medically necessary to save the pregnant person's life, and some self-proclaimed pro-life lawmakers insist that even these abortions should be illegal. In what world is allowing a person who's already living and breathing to die, taking the unborn fetus with them, pro-life? In what world is punishing people who have gotten abortions with death pro-life? In what world is forcing a pregnant person with pre-existing health conditions that will negatively affect the child to give birth pro-life? And in what world is forcing pregnant people who are more likely to die while giving birth to carry the fetus to term pro-life? I'll give you a hint. In no world is any of this pro-life. Some lawmakers even believe that a person who is pregnant because of sexual assault or incest should be forced to carry that fetus, regardless of how traumatic and damaging that would be to the pregnant person and their life. The absolute hypocrisy of people who are anti-choice calling themselves pro-life is truly astonishing. NARAL, a pro-choice organization, even points out this hypocrisy, describing how it's pretty hard to call yourself pro-life when you're actively working to imprison or execute women who access safe abortion care, tear babies away from their parents and lock them in cages with no plan to reunite them, silence doctors and strip reproductive health care away from millions of low-income people, stand by while the maternal mortality rates skyrocket and women, especially Black women, die in childbirth, deny affordable health care coverage to people with pre-existing conditions, cut programs that feed hungry kids, block access to HIV testing and treatment across the globe, and incite far-right violence with lies about abortion. It seems as though most people who are anti-choice are really just pro-birth, not caring what circumstances the child will be brought into after being born, and definitely not showing willingness to help those children after they're born. When the same people who describe themselves as pro-life refuse to create environments where all children can thrive, they're not acting in ways that are pro-life. People who have lower incomes are more likely to get abortions because they feel financially unable to properly care for a child. I would certainly consider an abortion more humane than bringing a child into a world that doesn't care about them, as the US government has proven time and time again that it doesn't care about or want to help low-income individuals or families. And considering America's increasing numbers of homeless youth, forcing more pregnant people to give birth to children they can't support only exacerbates this problem. My final point about anti-choicers and their tendency to not actually be pro-life is concerning COVID. Remember at the beginning of the virus's spread in America, when conservatives took to the streets chanting "My body, my choice" in response to mask mandates? While not all conservatives are anti-choice, and not all people who are anti-choice are conservative, the overlaps between anti-choice rhetoric and conservatism are too large to ignore. So many of the same people who reject the phrase "my body, my choice" when it comes to reproductive rights suddenly feel that they should have autonomy over their bodies when it comes to keeping other people safe from a deadly virus. The hypocrisy is excruciating, as those who proclaim themselves to be pro-life would rather kill others than wear a simple piece of cloth over their face. And while people who are anti-choice may insist that killing a fetus and killing a person by infecting them with COVID are equivalent, we must remember that the pandemic is a public health crisis, while getting a safe abortion is an extremely personal issue that only concerns the people involved. Government officials who consider themselves pro-life are the same officials that were pushing to reopen the economy while we were still in the middle of the worst of the pandemic in America. Can someone please explain to me how prioritizing money over human lives is pro-life? Because I'm just not seeing it. And these same officials who wanted to reopen the economy are now prioritizing confirming Amy Coney Barrett over getting out a second round of stimulus bills. Because nothing says pro-life like rushing to confirm a justice who was nominated during an election instead of helping the American people who really need it in the middle of a global pandemic. And when Trump got COVID, he received an antibody treatment that was developed with cells derived from abortion tissue, but suddenly all the anti-choicers were silent on the matter. The hypocrisy of picking and choosing when to be outraged about an issue depending on who is affected by it is sickening. Even the Trump administration itself has publicly taken a stance against medical research with abortion tissue, and yet, when it came down to it, they immediately accepted the antibody treatment, no questions asked. It is incredibly hypocritical for Trump to do everything in his power to fight against medical research that could help millions, maybe even billions of people, but when it comes to helping him, all of a sudden he's perfectly fine with it. According to a poll from the Pew Research Center, more than 2/3 of Americans believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Trump's nomination of Amy Coney Barrett for the main reason of overturning Roe v. Wade is not in line with the majority of Americans' ideals. Especially since the Trump administration is rushing to get her confirmed because they know that they shouldn't be nominating a new Supreme Court justice literally while an election is happening. Like, I literally already voted for Biden to become president, and Trump wants to pull one over on us and rush a confirmation that doesn't even align with the majority of Americans' views. As Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, stated in 2016 regarding Obama's SCOTUS nomination, the American people should have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice. And goes on to explain that, of course, it's within the president's authority to nominate a successor even in this very rare circumstance, Remember that the Senate has not filled a vacancy arising in an election year when there was a divided government since 1888, almost 130 years ago. But we also know that Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution grants the Senate the right to withhold its consent as it deems necessary. It's clear that concern over confirming Supreme Court nominations made near the end of a presidential term is not new. Given that we are in the midst of the presidential election process, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and I believe that it is today the American people who are best positioned to help make this important decision, rather than a lame duck president whose priorities and policies they just rejected in the most recent national election. Lindsey Graham, another Republican senator, even went further in 2016 when he told us to use his words against him.
This is the last year of a lame duck president, and if Ted Cruz or Donald Trump get to be president, they've all asked us not to confirm or take up a selection by President Obama. So if a vacancy occurs in their last year of their first term, guess what? You will use their words against them. I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me and you'd be absolutely right.
So basically, we should not allow Amy Coney Barrett to be confirmed as the next Supreme Court justice because of not only the corrupt circumstances that allowed her nomination to take place, but also because her views don't align with that of the majority of American people. We as a country should be allowed to choose the next president who gets to nominate that Supreme Court justice. We should not be stomped all over by the Republican majority Senate, along with their corrupt leader, Trump. And most importantly, we need to stop calling people who are anti-choice pro-life because their policies and viewpoints are conclusively anti-life. That's it for this video, but before I go, I want to remind you to check out the links in the description box below for places to donate, sign petitions, and learn about the Black Lives Matter movement, and how to support a pregnant person's right to make their own medical decisions. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you've made it this far, comment anti-choice doesn't mean pro-life down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!